The clock is ticking. With just 2 weeks to go until the government shuts down again, lawmakers are clashing over border funding. It comes as more troops in yet another caravan both make their way toward the southern border. President Trump considering whether to declare a national emergency tomorrow night or ahead of the State of the Union address. Yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures, I spoke with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle and asked whether House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will put forth money for that wall. She has said umpteen times there will be no money for any wall anywhere. There will be nothing. There will be $1, not more than that, because a wall is immoral. But in fact, isn't there a growing group of colleagues on the left, your colleagues, that say exactly what you just said, which is practical, that there should be money for everything, including in areas where it makes sense, a physical barrier?
I know in the past she has said where it makes sense to have physical barriers, we support physical barriers.
It's not a question about spending the dollars. It's a question, I suppose, either politics, which I think dominates when you have the speaker saying that no money, not $1 for wall, and you have the president insisting on a wall, in part because that's what he campaigned on and was elected on. It becomes politics, but it's not a financial, it's not a budgetary issue.
Joining me right now is Texas Congressman, House Energy and Commerce Committee member and medical doctor Michael Burgess. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for
having me on. So what do you think? Does this get resolved? Most people see right through this, that this is politics, that there are areas where we need a physical barrier, and then there are other areas where we don't.
Well, it certainly gets very interesting tomorrow night when all the principals are gathered in one place. But look, the president has said he needs money for physical barriers. I think there is, at least I've heard the past several days, some agreement from Democratic colleagues that physical barriers are important, are part of the solution.
Yeah.
I'm a little disappointed this conference committee wasn't in Washington over the weekend, is my understanding. They really need to be getting the information from the experts, present it. We're all going to have to vote on whatever it is they come up with in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see maximal effort on this.
Well, let me ask you this, because the president has been saying over the last couple of days that the wall is already being built, and that he's expecting 115 miles of wall to be built in the short term. So where is that money coming from? One of my guests yesterday said that there's about a half $500 million in the Homeland Security committee, the Office of the Homeland Security, rather, that is from confiscated drug money. Is that use? If it hasn't been allocated, the president can use that money, right?
Well,
if it hasn't been appropriated.
There are dollars in the account from previous appropriations. Not as sure about your other story about the confiscated drug money, but yeah, there's money in the account, so there is work ongoing at the present time.
So he can,
and the president is quite correct about that.
Begin that building. He can begin it.
Yeah, well, of course, the building has been going on for years. In 2006, the Secure Fence Act said we were going to once and for all secure our southern border. Nancy Pelosi voted for it. Chuck Schumer voted for it. I think Barack Obama, when he was a senator, voted for it.
That's right.
So the authorization from Congress is there. The dollars need to be supplied. Congress makes the appropriations. That's what has to happen next.
But people recognize that they voted for it before, that there's a wall in California, Nancy Pelosi state, dividing Tijuana from San Diego. And yet this politicking keeps going on. Even the guests will be divided at the State of the Union tomorrow night. The Journal this morning is reporting that Republicans are planning to invite law enforcement officials, while Democrats are inviting undocumented immigrants who work at golf clubs owned by President Trump.
Yeah, it can be an interesting juxtaposition. I'm actually going to bring a constituent who lost a daughter hit by a car driven by someone who was in the country, not here legally. He, of course, was a veteran and came to me one day and said, I put on the uniform and I was doing my job in Iraq. If you'd been doing your job, Congressman, my daughter would still be here. And that's been pretty tough to take. I have invited him to the State of the Union. I hope he'll be able to be there tomorrow night. It'll be something to see. So
you're a medical doctor. The president is also expected to talk about lowering costs for health care and prescription drugs. What are you expecting to hear out of the State of the Union tomorrow night?
Well, I do think the rebate issue that came up last week, and for companies to be able to directly reimburse patients rather than middlemen or third-party intermediaries or insurance companies to provide these rebates directly to patients, that seems to make a lot of sense. And I expect we may hear the president talk about that. And, of course, his trade policies have been front and center for some time. So I expect we'll hear him, and he ran on that. He won on that. I expect to hear him talk about his trade policies as well. And what will you be listening for specifically within health care? Within healthcare, a year ago, he laid it out and said pharmaceutical prices are too high and they're going to come down. Trust me, they're going to come down. I think he is going to continue to push that point. The work that the Secretary of Health and Human Services has done with the index pricing, with drugs sold on a global market, that's been interesting. Got a lot of people upset, right. But at the same time, it's been an interesting approach. I think you're likely to hear a continuation of that discussion that the president has put out before. Do you think that this is going to be the next 2 years of just fighting between the Democrats and the president, that you guys get nothing done for 2 years? How's that going to play on people going into 2020 and another presidential election? Well, it was fortunate that the first 2 years of the Trump administration were so productive, because I do think you're correct, and we have entered into the 2020 presidential race early. Iowa is still a year away, but every day that goes by, there's a new seemingly legitimate Democratic candidate. The press, as we all know, has been aligned against this president right from the get-go, and he will continue to have to carry all of that burden, and yet somehow this administration manages to get things done. So I will tell you, from the standpoint of being in the Congress, we got more done the first 2 years of the Trump administration than we had the previous 15 years. It really has been, when people stop and look at the accomplishments in the first 2 years of the Trump administration, they were significant. And goodness knows, you talked last hour about people who are talking down the economy. Yeah. That worries me, too. I don't know why that is happening, except that one way they see to defeat the president is to tank the economy. But that's a terrible, terrible deal for the American people. Well, it certainly looks good so far. The numbers have continued to show a strengthening economy in the U.S. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much. Good deal. Thank you. Congressman Michael Burgess joining us there.